So we've talked about hedging a couple of times. Hedging is a person or a process by which a person owns or plans to own a commodity and uses the commodity futures market or uses options, because options are a derivative of the futures market, but they're using that commodity futures market to somehow transfer risk or establish a price for a commodity to be sold at a later date. So what hedging is really trying to do is trying to minimize risk and establish prices. That's what a hedger is going to do. Now, there's two different people that are going to be engaging in the commodity futures market. It's going to be hedgers, those that own or plan on owning that commodity, and then the speculators. The speculators do not want to own a commodity. They have no intention to own a commodity. They are just in it to try and earn a profit, whereas a hedger is going to try and transfer risk. So the overall underlying purpose of the futures options is to take those that are looking to hedge and transfer that risk over to somebody who's willing to assume that risk, or a speculator. So that hedger is somebody who is going to own or plan on owning a commodity. That is a very important distinction right there. They're trying to transfer risk or establish that price. So when is a person going to hedge? Somebody who owns or plans on owning the commodity, when to hedge? So if you're going to hedge, you need to know a couple of things. First off, you need to know the enterprise cost of production. Knowing the enterprise cost of production, how much it costs you to produce that particular commodity, if you know that, a farmer can determine what prices he might consider to forward pricing portions of their crop. Now, we're using the farmer as an example, but that goes for agribusinesses too. If you need to buy a commodity, knowing how much it's going to cost and how much you're going to be able to sell it for is going to be a very important aspect to know how much you can afford to pay for it as well. So, knowing that cost of production, knowing how much you're going to be able to either sell it for, or if you're going to be buying this commodity, or know how much it costs you to produce if you're looking to sell it, is going to be an important aspect. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to establish a price, and that's known as forward pricing. Hedging, often farmers may use a hedge to try and establish a future price today for a future delivery. So that's that forward pricing. So they're trying to forward price their commodity, but they must know the cost of production. So let's think about it this way. If you don't know the cost of your production, if you don't know how much it's going to cost you to produce, how do you know what's a good price? What if it costs you $100 to produce something, but yet you forward price it at $75? That doesn't make much sense. Why would you forward price it at $75 if you think that maybe the prices are going to go up? You should always know the enterprise cost of production before you get in to start hedging, to where you can understand what is an acceptable price. So forward price it. So you're going to hedge and you're going to forward price when these future prices cover cost of production and provides a small margin. And you must, so in order to do that, in order to determine what is a good profit margin or an acceptable profit margin, you must know this enterprise cost of production. And you must, as a farmer or a rancher or even an agribusiness, must determine what is an acceptable price for you to take. Now, the thing about hedging is, and using the commodity markets in order to hedge or forward price a commodity, you're not trying to make the most profit. You're trying to minimize your risk. That's the key component of a hedger. They're trying to minimize a risk and establish a price. If you're trying to just make the most profit, you're going to play the markets, and that can get very risky. But you must determine what is an acceptable price. You got to remember, when you're hedging, you're not always trying to make the most profit. You're just trying to secure a certain profit margin for your enterprise, for your company. So how do you go about actually placing a hedge? So a person would actually contact a broker. The person wanting to place a hedge is going to contact the broker. The broker is then going to take an order for a set fee known as a brokerage fee or commission. So of course this broker is going to want to make a little bit of money off of it. They're going to say, all right, well, we'll go ahead and take this order for you, and we'll set this order for you. We'll go ahead and get you engaged in a forward or in a future contract or an options contract, but we're gonna take a small fee. We're gonna go ahead and take a fee to engage in this future contract for you, or a commission. So the broker will then provide guidance on how to appropriately place and exit that hedge. So that's why I would, especially if you're going to do this in the beginning, you probably should look into going with a broker, because that broker is going to provide guidance on how to appropriately place and exit this hedge, and kind of the steps you need to take. Now you can go with this web-based brokers, and those are popping up more and more, and they're becoming more and more popular. So you can go with the web-based broker, and they're going to charge lower fees. But typically, because they offer lower fees, they're going to offer less services. So this individual goes ahead and places an order with the broker. The broker contacts that brokerage house at the commodity exchange and relays that order from that buyer, from that person that's wanting to place that hedge, that buyer, that seller, that farmer or rancher that's placing that hedge. So that broker then places that order, relays that order. When that order is relayed and reaches the trading floor, the traders will use an open out call to match supply and demand. So remember, for every futures contract, there has to be a long and a short contract. So that broker places that order. The traders then use that open out call, and they're going to match a long contract with the short contract using that open out call. And that open out call are verbal buy and sell signals that's going to be happening there on the trading floor, or that's going to be happening electronically nowadays. So you got to remember, for every hedge, there is always another producer or speculator wanting to place a contrary hedge. Or if they're not placing a contrary hedge, there's going to be a speculator out there wanting to place a contract or contrary bid, a contrary long or short contract. So for every hedge, there's always somebody else willing to offset that, and either willing to take a risk, or they're willing to think that they're going to outguess the market, or willing to place a contrary hedge because they need to actually buy the commodity where you're selling it. So basically what this statement is saying is that for every long contract, there will always be a short contract made.